Hello, welcome to today's Tridium Talk. Whether you're live with us on Zoom or watching this over recording later, we're glad to have you. My name is Ruben Yanez de Leon. I'm the product manager for the Niagara Framework. Today, we're going to take a practical look at what secure communication means inside Niagara. This session is meant to give you a solid foundation. We'll discuss the fundamentals of secure communication, certificates, certificate authorities, and certificate signing requests, and then step into the Niagara Certificate Manager to see how it all comes together in practice. Think of this as the first of a series. Today, we'll cover the core concepts and hands-on basics of the Niagara Certificate Manager. In later Tridium talks, we'll dive into more advanced Niagara certificate management topics. So whether you're brand new to secure communication in Niagara or just looking to sharpen up your understanding, I hope this talk will help provide clarity and build your confidence to navigate Niagara's evolving security landscape. Before we begin, please note that this session is being recorded and will be available afterward on our website, tridium.com, under the Tridium Talks section, as well as on YouTube. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature to post your questions at any time. I'm joined today by Melanie Coggan, a senior software engineer here at Tridium. Melanie will be helping answer your questions and doing her best to keep me honest throughout the session. Here's what we'll cover today. We'll start with why secure communication matters, what's changing in Niagara 5, why Tridium is making these adjustments, and how this aligns with IT and cybersecurity best practices. Then we'll unpack what secure means and how TLS makes that possible through authentication, confidentiality, and integrity. From there, we'll dive into what certificates are and how they establish identity and trust. Then we'll move into what certificate authorities are and their important role in establishing trusted, secure communication. Then we'll discuss certificate signing requests and how the process establishes verified and trusted certificates. And we'll finish our talk with a demonstration of these fundamentals in the Niagara Certificate Manager. Before we jump into the technical side, I want to pause for a moment on a principle that guides how we approach product development at Tridium. You'll hear this phrase often when we talk about Niagara and cybersecurity: secure by default. It's more than just a slogan, it's a design philosophy. It means that security shouldn't be something you have to add on after the fact. It should be there from the start. Our goal is that when you install Niagara, it's already configured to protect communication and identity by default, not something you have to chase later through settings or patches. So, as we talk about secure communication today, this is really the heart of it, building trust into the system from day one. So, let's discuss why security communication matters now more than ever, both for Niagara as a framework and for all of us who deploy and support it. Why this matters. Niagara 5.0 begins the deprecation of insecure Fox and web connections. That means that traditional HTTP and Fox protocols, which transmit data in plain text, are being phased out. So looking ahead, future Niagara 5 releases will remove these insecure options entirely. Everything will move towards secure, encrypted communication by default. This isn't just a Tridium decision. It aligns with broader industry best practices and growing security expectations across IT and building systems. Which takes us to why this is necessary. Insecure communications are inherently vulnerable. They can be intercepted, spoofed, or modified in transit. major browsers are increasingly restricting or warning about insecure HTTP traffic, especially in mixed content scenarios. While there's no official timeline for disabling HTTP entirely, the trend is clear and systems should be ready. I, IT departments now expect systems to be secure by default, not something they have to harden after installation. And standards and guidance such as NIST and ISO encourage or require using cryptographic protections for information in transit, including internal communications in many cases. So, what this means for you as integrators and partners, secure communication is becoming mandatory. Understanding how it works is no longer optional. It's now fundamental part of deploying Niagara systems. The good news is that Niagara provides the tools to manage this transition. You just need to be comfortable using them. So education and awareness are key. The more familiar you are with Niagara's built-in tools for managing certificates and secure connections, the smoother this transition will be for both you and your customers. So let's take the next step and talk about what it means to have secure communication and what's happening under the hood when Niagara uses TLS. Let's start with what is insecure communication, what that means. When traffic isn't protected, anyone along the path can read it. It's completely open. It can be modified while in transit without either side knowing. And there's no verification of who's on the other end. In other words, insecure communication offers no privacy, no integrity, and no identity check. A simple way to picture it is like sending a postcard through the mail. Anyone who handles it can read what's written on it. Anyone can even scribble on it or change the message before it arrives. And while it might reach an address, there's no guarantee who actually receives it. That's basically what unencrypted communication looks like: readable, alterable, and unverified. Now, let's contrast that with secure communication. When communication is secure, the data is protected from being read by unintended parties. It's protected from being altered while in transit. And this is key, the identity of the recipient is verified. In short, security transforms communication from something open and anonymous into something private and authenticated. So instead of a postcard, imagine a sealed envelope. Only the intended recipient can open and read it. The envelope itself is tamper evident. If someone tries to open it, you'll know immediately. And the delivery person checks ID before handing it over. That's the difference. That's the difference that encryption and authentication make. It's privacy, integrity, and identity verification all working together. And in Niagara, the technology that makes this transformation possible is TLS, Transport Layer Security. TLS is what turns Niagara's postcards into sealed envelopes. It's the protocol that ensures every message sent between workbench, stations, supervisors, and browsers is encrypted, tamper-proof, and authenticated. Certificates are pivotal in secure TLS communication. What exactly is a certificate? You can think of a certificate as an ID card for computers, something a device or system presents to prove who it is when communicating securely. Just like we use driver's license or passports in the real world, computers use certificates to prove their digital identity. Certificates serve two main roles. As mentioned, they prove identity, they confirm the system really is who they say they are, and it enables encryption, which ensures that the data exchange between two systems stays private and can't be tampered with. Every certificate contains two essential components that make it work. First, identity. That's the part that says who it belongs to, like the name and the organization on an ID. This is the visible, verifiable part of a certificate: who issued it, who it belongs to, and how long it's valid. Just like a driver's license, a certificate includes identifying details and an expiration date. A certificate's expiration date is configurable, but the industry is moving towards standardizing certificate lifespans to 47 days. Systems use the identity information to decide if they should trust the connection. And secondly, keys, the cryptographic tools that are used to protect the messages being exchanged. These are what handle the encryption and decryption, ensuring that even if someone intercepts the message, they can't read it or alter it. So you can think of the identity as the face and signature on the license, and the keys as the secure mechanism behind it. Together, they make trust possible in the digital world. Of course, certificates don't look like state-issued identity cards. This is what certificates look like in Niagara and in Google Chrome. Rather than a person's name, address, and DMV ID information, a certificate contains identity information such as name, organization, or host name. Now that we understand what certificates are, let's talk about why some are trusted, but at the same time, some other certificates are not trusted. The identity of a host certificate can be verified through digital signatures from third parties called certificate authorities, or CAs. Think of a CA as a trusted organization that verifies your identity before signing off on your digital ID card. We'll discuss CAs and certificate signing more in a bit. If a host trusts a certain CA, it will trust the identity of any valid certificate that's been signed by that CA. CA signed certificates expire, just like any other certificate, so they require periodic renewal too. So, in everyday terms, you can think of a CA signed certificate like an ID card issued by a trusted source, such as a government issued ID card. On the other hand, there are certificates that are self-signed. These certificates are that have been signed by itself instead of being verified and signed by a trusted authority. Essentially, a self-signed certificate is saying, "Trust me because I say so." Self-signed certificates still encrypt traffic, so the data itself is secure in transit, but the certificate doesn't prove identity, and so no third party has validated it. Because of that, TLS-based connections on Niagara Workbench, web browsers, and the Niagara Network station connections, they'll show security warnings when you connect to a self-signed certificate. It's the system's way of saying, "Hey, I can't confirm who this really is." So connecting to hosts with self-signed certificates requires manual user approval and intervention. Self-signed certificates are fine for initial device commissioning or testing or private lab environments where one is certain of identity of the host being connected to, but they're really not meant for production systems. You can think of them like a homemade ID card. It might have a picture and a name, but no one can verify if the identity of the holder is legitimate. This guy is saying he's Ruben Yanez de Leon with this self-produced ID, but it hasn't been validated by any third-party authority. I would not trust this guy to be who he says he is. So when it comes to identity and trust, CA signed certificates are the gold standard. They're how systems trust who they're talking to. Now that we've seen how certificates establish identity, let's look how they protect the data being exchanged. Certificates contain two cryptographic components, a public key and a private key, and these two always work together as a matched pair. The public key is the part that gets shared freely. You can give it to anyone. Other systems use it to do two main things. First, they can encrypt a message so that only the corresponding private key can open it. Second, they can use it to verify a digital signature, confirming that a message really came from the trusted source. The matching private key is the opposite. It's kept secret, safely stored on the host, and never shared. It performs the complementary task of the public key. It decrypts messages that were encrypted with the public key, and it digitally signs messages before sending them, proving that they came from the rightful sender. Together, these two keys create the foundation for encrypted and authenticated communication. So, in short, the public key locks, the private key unlocks. Together, they give us both confidentiality and authenticity. And that's the foundation of how TLS secures communication in Niagara. Understanding how these keys work helps explain why certificates are so critical to maintaining trust and data protection. As mentioned before, a certificate authority, or CA, is an entity that verifies other digital entities. Think of them as the notaries of the internet. Their job is to confirm that a system, website, or device really is who it says it is. Once a CA has verified a host identity, it digitally signs the host certificate. That digital signature acts like a stamp of approval. It says, this system's identity has been verified by someone you already trust. There are two main types of certificate authorities that work together in layers to balance trust and security. A root CA is the top of the trust hierarchy, the ultimate authority. Root CAs are built directly into your computer or device's operating system. Because of that, anything signed by a root CA is automatically trusted. Below that, you have intermediate CAs. These are often validated by the root CA. They handle day-to-day signing of certificates for organizations like Niagara systems or devices. The structure helps protect the root CA. If an intermediate CA ever gets compromised, the root CA stays safe, and the compromised intermediate can simply be revoked. Intermediate CAs can also be used to validate other intermediate CAs, forming a CA hierarchy, sometimes several layers deep. In turn, those intermediate CAs could be used to sign yet other intermediates or to validate and sign host certificates. You can think of this like a government system for IDs. The root CA is the national authority, say the Department of State, which authorizes local offices. Those offices, those intermediates, issue IDs to citizens, the devices in our case. If you trust the government agency, you can trust the ID that came from its authorized offices. Now that we've covered what certificate authorities are, let's look at how trust flows between them. Every secure connection relies on what's called a chain of trust, a sequence of certificates that verify each other, one link at a time. Again, at the top is the root CA, the anchor of trust. It's trusted directly by operating systems and browsers right out of the box. Because it's already trusted, anything the root CA signs is automatically considered valid. The root CA then signs certificates of one or more intermediate CAs. Intermediate CAs are usually the ones that sign certificates for devices. At the bottom of the chain is the device certificate, what Niagara supervisors and JSON use. When your workbench or browser connects, it doesn't just trust the device on its own, It checks every certificate above it until it reaches an intermediate or root CA it already knows and trusts. If every link in the chain checks out, each one valid and correctly signed, then the device's certificate is trusted and the connection is secure. But what happens if one of those links break? Let's say an intermediate certificate has expired or it was issued by a CA that's no longer trusted. That the system can't verify that middle link, and that means that the rest of the chain fails, even if the device certificate itself looks fine. When this happens, browsers and Niagara Workbench both show warnings, usually something like certificate not trusted or couldn't verify issuer. Those warnings tell you, hey, I can't trace the certificate all the way back to someone I know and I trust. So that's the essence of the chain of trust, a layered hierarchy that only works if every link is valid. Let's look at what happens during a certificate signing request. It begins on the Niagara device itself. The host generates a self-signed certificate that includes all its identifying details, things like its alias, common name, and organization, along with the key pair, one public, one private. That signed certificate can then be exported as a CSR or certificate signing request. This request bundles the host's public key and identity information while keeping the private key safe on the device. In other words, Niagara automatically packages what the certificate authority needs to verify without exposing anything sensitive. The CSR is then sent to a certificate authority, either an internal company, CA, which is most likely, or maybe a public provider like DigiCert. The CA checks the information in that CSR, basically confirming that the device really belongs to the organization it claims. Once verified, the CA signs a certificate and sends it back, often with intermediate certificates that complete the chain of trust. The Niagara host then imports the signed certificate, replacing its self-signed one with this CA signed version. Now the device is officially trusted by systems and browsers that recognize the CA. So the CSR process is what transforms a self-signed certificate into a trusted one. It's how the Niagara host formally joins the chain of trust. So let's see much of what we discussed here in the workbench. In Niagara, a host or application certificates with their private keys are stored in a key store. Trusted root certificate authorities are stored in a system trust store, and trusted intermediate certificate authorities that have been added are stored in a user trust store. This can all be accessed from the device or host certificate management. Other pieces of software, such as the operating system, Windows in this case, or web browsers like Google Chrome, will have similar views to manage certificates for their own use. I'm going to begin by using the certificate manager for my workbench. These are not the certificates for the Niagara daemon running on this machine. They are the certificates specifically managed for my workbench. There are two different views to access similar functionality. We have the AX certificate management view and the certificate management view. For the most part, they have similar views and functionality. I'll select the certificate management view. The certificate management view has four views within it. We have the user key store, which is the default view of the certificate manager. This is where certificates with their public and private keys are managed. We have the system trust store. This shows all the certificates of root certificate authorities or CAs. Any certificate that has been signed by any of these valid root CAs, and note that there are some invalid root CAs, or by intermediate CAs that had been signed by these root CAs will be trusted by the workbench. This list has been populated by Java and cannot be edited by users. The user trust store is where certificates of trusted intermediate CAs or certificate authorities are added and removed. Any certificate that has been signed by any of these valid intermediate CAs will be trusted by the workbench. I don't currently have any in here. And allowed hosts manages certificates of hosts who have had invalidated certificates. So here, these invalidated certificates can be manually approved so that the workbench will connect to their host using TLS, regardless of the invalid certificate. So let's play around with some of the basics that we've discussed. I'll go to the user trust store where I have one certificate. It's the self-signed certificate my workbench created when I first installed it. I'll double click this certificate and we can see the various properties of it. Note that it's self-signed as the issued by property as well as the subject property are the same. I'm going to close this, and within my user trust store, I'm going to make a new certificate of my own by clicking new on the bottom. Here, I'll be asked to provide some information about this new certificate that I want to create. So I'll give my certificate a name, Rubens CA Cert. I'm going to fill some properties out here. I actually want this to be Rubens CA Cert. Okay. Here we can set the expiration date for the certificate. By default, it's set for a year, but different organizations will have different requirements for the expiration. I'm going to leave this as it is for this demonstration. I'll skip over the key algorithm for now, as well as the key size. And now I can select the certificate usage. I want this certificate to be used as a CA or certificate authority. I'll click OK. And so making a certificate requires making a private key, which needs a password to protect it. These passwords, just like the private key itself, need to be protected. So here I'll put in my super secret password. And after just a bit, I have a new certificate. The certificate is sitting in the key store of my Niagara Workbench home. If I want to access it, I can export it by selecting the certificate and then export on the bottom. Here I can select the format, and I'll leave that at PEM for now. I'll leave the file name the same as the certificate. And here I have the option of exporting the private key. And if I do that, I need to put in the private key password, and I need to, or I don't need to, but I should encrypt that private key. And I have the option to reuse the same password that I have for the private key. For this demonstration, I'm not going to export my private key. Here's all the properties of that CA certificate, and I will press OK. I now have the option as to where I want to save the certificate. I'm going to save it in my user home under certificate management, and it'll be Ruben CA cert.pem. I just noticed that I have two E's in there, and I'll let it be. Now I'm going to go to my user trust store in the certificate manager, and I can import my CA certificate. I'll choose file. It takes me here uh, to my folder for my user home, and I'll select my certificate. It gives me the properties to review of that CA certificate, and I'll select OK. And now my user trust store has this CA certificate, and anything signed by this certificate or anything that's valid that is signed by the certificate will now be accepted by my workbench. Again, this is within my workbench and not for my local running station. So let's switch gears a bit. I'm going to log into the station that is running on my laptop using FoxS. So you'll notice that I've been met with this warning, and you can see here, unable to verify host identity. This is my workbench telling me that it can't validate the certificate being used. And if we compare the issued by, well, now I'm lying because I've signed this with something else before. But if if this was a self-signed certificate, these two would have the same value. I'm going to reject this for right now, and I'll go back to my certificate management view. And we can see the certificate that I have rejected on my workbench. Now, from this view, if I wanted to, I can approve an exemption to accept secure connections to this host and its certificate. And so what I'm doing is I'm manually allowing encrypted connections to this host, even though the identity to the host can't be verified by any means of authentication. So now if I connect via Fox, I no longer get FoxS, that is, I no longer get that server warning. But once I log in, I'm still met with this other warning. And this one is for the HTTPS, the web server. And it has warnings because it doesn't understand, this certificate has not been verified either. I'm going to accept the exception here. And what I'll do now is go back to my certificate management view, my workbench, and you can see port 443 has been accepted. So by accepting that, it's been added to my allowed hosts. So let's do something different. Let's go to the certificate manager of my local host. And let's create another certificate within the host. So this is not the certificate manager for my workbench, but now this is for the daemon that's running on my machine. I'll say new. I'll call it Rubens server cert. And for time's sake, I'm just going to only fill in the things that are required here. And in this case, I'm going to leave this as server, as I want to be able to use this certificate as a server certification. And I will click OK. Because we're making a new server, or a new certification, that is, we are making a new private key. So we need to protect it with a password. And now I have a certificate that I just made that can be used as a server certificate. What I'm going to do now is make a certificate signing request. It wants a password for the private key. And now it's asking where I want to save this certificate signing request, or CSR, and I'll save it under cert management of my user home. And to kind of finish off my demonstration here, I will go to my workbench and go to the certificate signer tool. So this allows me to sign certificates with my workbench. And here I can select the certificate I want to sign. I'll sign the server certificate I just made. It gives me all the information, all the properties from that certificate. And now it's asking what CA, what certificate authority cert do I want to use to sign it? I only have one, and that's the one that I just created a little bit ago on my workbench. I'll use that, and I need the password. And now it asks what kind of format. I had the option as to what format I want that signed certificate as. I'll leave it as a pen. I'll press OK. It's asked me where to save it, user home, cert management. And now I can import that signed certificate. And now the station, now the platform that Damon sees that it has a signed certificate. So there's a lot to this. And the purpose here was just to cover the fundamentals and what they mean. Hopefully, this demonstration is helpful. So with that, we'll go to question and answer. And if you haven't already, please feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And this is really where Melanie will shine. Let's see.
You've tried to answer.
Some of these are, seems like they're more advanced and maybe need to be, they'll be answered after. So Melanie, the question was asked, why did you also get a web server cert when you only attempted to connect to the station on 4911?
So I was busy answering questions when you did
Oh,
that part of the demo, but I'm
I'm sorry.
guessing it is probably because you had tried to view a web view at some point. And that may be so all the Baja UX views, so the property sheet versus the AX property sheet will initiate a web connection, which will have you make you have to either approve a web cert if it's not previously approved, and if it's not a validly signed certificate, or it will, go through that workflow if it's a properly signed certificate.
If you have that Fox over WebSockets fallback
That's true.
enabled,
Yep.
that would also trigger that.
Yeah, my answer was going to be that the workbench uses so many of these UX views, which are web views, HTTP, they use the web server, that it's just connecting to that web server for those views. So it sounds like I wasn't far off. I like this question, Melanie. Is certification necessary? I imagine he's talking about secure communication. Are they necessarily necessary if you only access a BMS on a local network? And I really like this question. Could you provide an answer to that?
Sure. So one of the principles that we're seeing more and more in any kind of environment is the concept of zero trust. So you may be on a local network, and that does provide a great deal of security compared to being online. However, there is the possibility that somebody would infiltrate your local network. And in that case, having TLS provides you with an extra layer of security that protects you in those cases as well.
Thank you. Have I heard, is it correct that most attacks occur from within the firewall?
That is very frequent because the weakest link tends to be human beings. And so we will click on something that we shouldn't in an email, somehow get malware installed on our computers. And then once the malware is installed, it is on that local network, and then it can access these unencrypted communications.
Thank you. So this question is asked, if I'm correct, you said that SSL, TLS certificates will be required in 5.x release. 5.0 will begin deprecation, but they will still be supported for a couple releases after that. But yes, eventually in the future, all Fox connections and web connections will require that they use encryption authentication, so certificates.
Here's a good follow-up for that one for you, Ruben. Will Niagara 5, in Niagara 5, will the procedure to create the certificate be the same or change?
I'm sorry. Can
That's
you
all
ask that
good.
one again?
In Niagara 5, will the procedure to create the certificate be the same or change? Was a good follow-up to that question. The process that you just showed.
That's a great question. Right now, my understanding is that it will be the same, but I'm sure that we are going to start working on making it more effective and efficient. That isn't a promise about any specific feature to come, but rather just recognizing that security being so important in Niagara 5 and the product, as the product progresses, there's going to be opportunities to optimize these workflows. So that's kind of asking me to look into my crystal ball a little bit today, and mine doesn't work, but that's my best answer.
We have a question. If you now log in with a web browser, the certificate will still not be accepted because the CA is unknown for the web browser. Is this correct? So yes, that is correct. The CA has to be installed on the client that is connecting to the station. If you're in the browser, the client is the browser. If you're in Workbench, the client is Workbench, and they have different certificate stores. Most browsers do support installing CAs, so that is always a possibility. If you're able to get an external CA like VeriSign or DigiCert to sign your certificates, that would be another possibility. But as I mentioned in another question, that can be difficult because oftentimes they will want to have proof that you own the particular server, and that will require you putting it on the internet, which we absolutely do not recommend for your JACEs. So typically it will also require installing the CA on your browser. We also have a FIPS question. If FIPS is enabled, will self-signed certs using this method satisfy the requirements in all 3 locations? If you are in FIPS mode, there are no issues with using self-signed certs. That is perfectly acceptable according to FIPS. However, there are slightly more stringent requirements on the key sizes that you can use. And if you're generating a certificate in FIPS mode, the key sizes are adjusted to only allow FIPS supported key sizes. So you can do it that way to make sure that you're generating a proper certificate.
There's a question, the three locations being server, Jace, and laptop or workbench. And I imagine that that's referring to those user trust stores and the key store. So in all of those that you listed, they will each have their own. A server or a supervisor, it's going to have its trust or in where you have to put your CAs or manage your certificates. Same with separate JACEs. And then you talk about laptop or workbench. As I demonstrated, the workbench has its own certificate management. So yeah, you have various places where you have to manage these certificates and the certificate authority certificates.
Hey,
A lot
Ruben,
of
I
really
think
good questions.
I was just gonna
Oh,
say all these questions that keep coming in. I think we should export this and answer these offline. Sounds
Yeah, I
like
think that's gonna be ideal. A lot of great questions though. I'm really glad to see the interest and glad to hear the feedback here, specifically about how some customers are requiring really important, as I mentioned, and someone here has mentioned their customer requiring certificates to be renewed every 45 days. So these are really, really good feedback. But yes, absolutely. We will take all these questions offline. We will answer them the best we can. We'll make them available. So with that, we've reached the end of today's Tridium Talk. I hope it was informative and I hope that it was helpful. And so thank you so much for your time today. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Take care.